My wife has a secret friend, and as it turns out, my mom is her biggest ally. They think they're fooling me while I've been pretending not to notice a thing. But when they realize who's really running this game, there won't be anywhere left for them to hide. Alright, so here's the thing. My name is Lewis. I'm 25 and I always thought my life was pretty well put together, you know? Steady job, decent house, and a wife. Casey, she's 23, who made me feel like maybe, just maybe, I was doing something right. Oh, and there's my mom, Karen, 46. Usually she's supportive, the my son can do no wrong type of mom. But that's the key word here. Usually. Things started changing, and honestly, I can't say it was all that subtle. It all began at one of those family dinners we sometimes have to remind ourselves we're still a family. We're sitting there, the food's on the table, Casey's telling some story about work, and Karen's laughing way too hard at something not even remotely funny. You know those fake laughs where it's so obvious they're trying too hard? Yeah, that was Karen. I thought it was odd, but hey, people can have off days, right? Right. So the dinner's winding down, Casey heads off to take a call, and it's just me and my mom at the table. She leans in real close like she's got some kind of life-altering secret to share. Then, out of nowhere, she drops this little gem. Lace, honey, sometimes people need a little freedom. Don't you think it's important to let Casey explore who she is? I'm sorry, what? My mind's racing 100 miles an hour. Freedom? Explore? Casey? She might as well have come out and handed me a map with a big red X where I should start digging for the secrets. But instead, I just look at her and say, sure, Mom, but what are you getting at? Karen just shrugs, smiling this tight-lipped smile like she's got it all figured out and I'm the clueless one. Then she drops a line that sticks with me. Sometimes it's best to let people find themselves. Just be understanding. I nodded along, but in my head I was thinking, yeah, understanding that you're definitely hiding something from me, Mom. The vibe at that table got real weird real fast, but I played along, trying to keep things normal, or as normal as it gets when you start suspecting your own mom might be in on something you're totally in the dark about. I mean, what am I even supposed to say? Hey, Mom, do you think my wife might be cheating? That wouldn't have gone over well, and something told me she'd just dance around the question anyway. Later that night, Casey and I were sitting on the couch, and she's texting someone. I ask her who it is, and she says, "Oh, just a work friend." Sure, fine. Nothing wrong with that, right? But she kept her phone angled away from me, which, yeah, might not be an obvious red flag, but it was enough to make me feel like something was off. She's scrolling, smiling, texting back and forth, and meanwhile, I'm sitting there feeling like a third wheel in my own marriage. I wanted to call her out, but the last thing I needed was to start something without proof. So, I decided to wait it out, play the long game, and see if I could catch a pattern. Turns out the pattern was easy to spot. Lots of work dinners where she came back looking way too cheerful for someone who just spent hours talking to colleagues. And every time she got a text, she'd do that little phone tilt again, like I'd just vanish if I couldn't see the screen. Fast forward a few days, and Karen's at it again with her advice. We're at the grocery store, of all places, and out of the blue she goes, "You know, sometimes it's healthy to trust your partner fully. Relationships need breathing room." I almost dropped a box of cereal. Here we go again. More cryptic messages from the Queen of Subtlety. I'm not saying my mom's acting was bad, but it was getting real obvious she knew something I didn't, and honestly, it was getting under my skin. I decided I'd test the waters a bit, see if she'd crack under pressure. So I turned to her and say, "You know, I think Casey and I are doing fine. Not sure why you keep bringing this stuff up, though. Feels like there's something you're not telling me." She looked at me all wide-eyed and innocent and just gave a casual shrug. "Just trying to help, honey. I've been around the block a few times, you know." "Yeah, great, Mom. Thanks for all the non-help." But now I was really convinced there was definitely more to this than she was letting on. The weird vibes, the awkward advice, the way she laughed a little too hard at all of Casey's stories, it all added up to something I couldn't ignore anymore. I knew I needed to find out what was going on, and I wasn't just going to sit back and trust, like Karen kept hinting. No, I was going to get to the bottom of this, whatever it took. So, I decided to play it cool, right? If Casey and my mom had some twisted little secret, I wasn't about to charge in like a bull in a china shop. Instead, I went into spy mode. I mean, who doesn't want to feel like a detective in their own marriage? Let's just say it was time for Operation Catch My Wife, starring yours truly. A few days after that lovely freedom talk from my mom, Casey started acting even weirder. And when I say weird, I mean the, "Who are you and what did you do with my wife?" kind of weird. She had these work dinners that went later and later, and every time she came back, she was practically beaming like she just got handed an award or something. And don't get me started on her phone. The thing was glued to her hand. I'd ask a simple, "So, who's texting?" and get back a classic, "Oh, just a friend." Yeah, right. Last time I checked, friends don't make you grin like a kid on Christmas morning. One night, she left her phone on the couch for a whole 5 seconds, and naturally, my inner detective perked up. I tried to play it cool, picked it up, and bam, notification from some guy named Mike. Don't forget to delete everything before he sees. I froze. My heart was pounding, but my brain was firing on all cylinders. So much for just a friend, right? That's when things got real. I wanted to storm into the room, wave the phone around, and ask her exactly who she thought she was fooling. But I could hear my mom's words echoing in my head about freedom and trust. Was she covering for Casey? Or worse, encouraging her? I couldn't believe I was even thinking this, but it was like every little thing was adding up to one big, twisted conspiracy. The next morning, I confronted my mom as casually as you can when you're trying to stay undercover. I sat down with her over breakfast, gave her this casual, "You know, Casey's been out late a lot. Have you noticed anything different about her?" She didn't even blink. "Oh, honey, I wouldn't worry. Young people need their space. It's healthy." Healthy? If this was healthy, I'd hate to see what she'd call toxic. That was it. I knew for sure now that my mom wasn't just in the loop. She was practically the head cheerleader for whatever Casey was doing. She was all calm and cool, drinking her coffee like she wasn't defending the person ripping apart my life from the inside out. At that moment, I made a decision. If they were keeping secrets from me, I'd make sure to find every last one of them. All right, so I had the proof. Casey's little friend Mike and my mom's endless encouragement were practically mocking me at this point. But I wasn't just going to sit back and let them play me like some clueless fool. Nope, it was time to turn the tables. First order of business. Pretend everything was perfectly fine. Keep smiling. Keep acting like I was oblivious. Let's just say I was about to give the performance of a lifetime. That night, Casey was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone as usual. I sat down next to her, all smiles, and threw out a casual, "You know, I feel like we haven't spent much time together lately. Maybe we should have a date night this weekend." She looked up, surprised, but she gave me this weirdly guilty smile and said, "Yeah, maybe." Ah, the hesitation was all I needed. Maybe, huh? Translation: I'll be out with Mike. Now that I knew her plan, I figured I'd add a little twist of my own. A few days later, when she thought she was headed out for one of her work dinners, I slipped a note into her purse. Just a little message that said, "I know." Nothing more, nothing less. I wanted her to think twice, to feel that spark of paranoia. What would she do? Tell my mom? Confront me? Or maybe she'd try to play it cool. I was dying to see. The next morning, she was on edge. Every time I walked into the room, she gave me this look like she was checking if I'd figured her out. Bingo. Now I had her right where I wanted. Time for phase 2. Later that night, I decided it was time to accidentally mention Mike. We were having dinner, awkward as always these days, and I casually dropped, "So, anyone interesting at work lately? Like Mike, maybe?" Her fork froze midair, and her face went pale. "How do you know about Mike?" she stammered. trying to brush it off with a laugh. "Oh, I'm just good at guessing," I said with a grin, acting as innocent as I could. She looked like she'd seen a ghost. I could tell she was scrambling for excuses, but she just mumbled, "Yeah, just a work thing." Right, a work thing. Classic. When she left to take a call, probably from Mike himself, I decided it was time for a heart-to-heart with my mom. I found my mom in the kitchen, humming and chopping vegetables like nothing was wrong in the world. I casually leaned against the counter and said, "Mom, quick question. What exactly is your deal with Casey? You seem very supportive lately." Her face twisted into that look she always gives when she's pretending not to know what I mean. "Oh, honey, I just think every marriage has its own rhythm. You can't control everything," she said with that classic mom smile that used to be comforting. Now it was just infuriating. "Right, because secretly supporting my wife's freedom behind my back is the best way to help me grow," I shot back, my voice dripping with sarcasm. She just shrugged, all casual, like she hadn't just thrown me under the bus. Sometimes people need space to figure things out. I couldn't believe it. My own mom was basically coaching my wife on how to have a double life. I walked out of that kitchen with one thought in my mind. I was going to make sure they both knew what it felt like to be deceived. They wanted to play games? Fine, let's play. Now that I knew Casey and my own mom were practically in cahoots, I decided it was time to bring out the big guns. No more Mr. Nice Guy. They wanted to play with me? Fine. I was about to turn this into the ultimate game of who's fooling who. A few days later, I kicked off my plan with something subtle, just enough to get Casey squirming. She was getting ready for another one of her work meetings, and I casually asked, "So, where are you and Mike heading tonight?" Her eyes widened for a split second before she forced a laugh, trying to play it cool. "What?" "No, it's just the team tonight," she said a little too quickly. "Oh, right, I nodded, pretending to believe her. "I'm sure Mike is just a team player, right?" I threw in my most innocent grin and watched as she struggled to keep her calm. It was almost too easy. The moment she left, I texted her a quick, "Hope you and Mike have a great night," sent with a smiley face. Nothing too incriminating, but just enough to keep her guessing how much I actually knew. Now I wasn't going to stop with Casey. My dear mom needed a taste of her own medicine too. So I went over to her house for a casual visit. We sat down with coffee, and she launched into another one of her classic speeches about letting people grow and the importance of trust. It was almost laughable. I could hardly keep a straight face. "Yeah, Mom," I said, nodding along. "I think I finally understand what you mean. Trust is key, right? Like, I totally trust Casey with all her extra activities." The coffee cup paused halfway to her mouth, and for a moment she looked at me, really looked at me, like she was trying to see how much I knew. "Oh, honey, I'm glad you're finally getting it," she said, keeping her voice level but looking way too tense for her own good. She thought she had me under control. Perfect. That's exactly where I wanted her. For the next few days, I kept dropping little hints, making sure they'd catch on. I'd casually mention places Casey and I should go to, only for her to get all nervous because they were places she'd been with Mike. Or I'd accidentally leave my laptop open with a few suspiciously bold search tabs, like how to catch someone cheating and ways to expose liars. It was childish, sure, but watching her face when she caught a glimpse was priceless. Then there was my mom. She started texting me advice every day, like she was on some kind of mission to keep me calm and clueless. Little did she know, I was onto every word. I responded with stuff like, "You're right, Mom. I should definitely give Casey all the freedom she needs," or, "I'm sure this time apart will only make us stronger." She had no idea I was playing her own game against her. I knew I couldn't keep this act going forever, not when things were getting this twisted, but watching them both dance around, thinking they were in control, was a thrill I couldn't resist. They wanted me to be the clueless husband and obedient son? Fine. I'd play that part, but only until I had everything I needed to knock them off their pedestal. They had no idea what was coming. At this point, I'd laid down the groundwork, and now it was time to watch the tension build. Casey and my mom were clearly on edge, like they knew something was off but couldn't quite figure it out. They'd see me smiling, and I could tell it freaked them out. After all, what could be scarier than a guy who knows what you're up to but doesn't call you out? Nothing quite like the silent treatment to get people sweating. The best part? Casey still had no idea I was playing her. Every day she was waiting for me to snap or confront her, but all she got was a cheerful, "Hey babe, how was work?" The look on her face whenever I'd ask that. Absolutely priceless. She'd try to play it cool, casually mumbling about another long day, while clutching her phone like it held the secrets to the universe. Honestly, the way she acted, you'd think the thing was her lifeline. One night, I suggested a movie night. Popcorn, pajamas, the whole deal. Figured it would be a good way to throw her off. I grabbed my laptop to stream a movie and accidentally pulled up a tab with a suspiciously bolded title. Top 10 Signs Your Partner is Cheating. She went pale faster than I could say. Unfaithful. She stared at the screen, then at me, and finally mumbled, "Are you looking up relationship stuff?" "Oh, just doing a little reading," I said casually, not even looking at her. "Just, learning how to keep the spark alive." I smirked, and she gave me the most uncomfortable smile I'd ever seen. I could practically hear the gears turning in her head, trying to decide if I knew anything or was just blissfully ignorant. Meanwhile, I had Mom on the back burner. She'd check in every day, her texts like clockwork. "Just remember to be patient, Louie," or "Relationships take work." The irony of her lectures was almost too much, so I started replying with the same energy, dropping little bombs like, "Totally, Mom. I'm learning a lot about forgiveness and letting go." Sometimes I'd throw in, "And I guess you were right all along," just to see how she'd react. That always kept her texting. One afternoon, I accidentally left an open notebook on the coffee table with my plans scribbled down in vague details. Lines like, "Discover the truth," and "Confront the lies." Nothing specific, just enough to make anyone snooping sweat. Sure enough, I came back to find Casey staring at it wide-eyed, her face a mix of horror and confusion. She looked at me, stammering, Is everything okay?" "Oh, totally," I replied with a grin, grabbing the notebook like I didn't care. "Just some, personal notes, self-improvement stuff, She nodded slowly, clearly not buying a word of it, but also too freaked out to ask questions, just the way I wanted it. By now, every little mistake I made was pushing them closer to the edge. Watching Casey try to carry on her normal life while waiting for the other shoe to drop was like watching a suspense movie. The tension was building, and they both knew something big was coming. They just didn't know when. And that was exactly how I wanted it. I was going to let them keep sweating, let them live in the constant anticipation that maybe, just maybe, I'd finally snap. But the best part? I had no intention of stopping. So, all right, we're deep into the game now. Casey's paranoia is through the roof, and Mom, she's practically running on overdrive, texting me every day like I'm some kind of emotional project she can fix. Little did they know, I was just getting started. The real fun began when I decided to set up a little surprise. I'd learned that Casey was meeting up with her friend Mike at this quiet cafe on the other side of town. Perfect spot for some innocent hangout, right? I mean, who would ever notice? So I texted Casey in the morning. "Hey babe, hope you have a great day. Thinking of swinging by your office around lunch to surprise you." The second I hit send, I could practically feel her panic from across the room. She looked at her phone, her face dropping for a split second, then gave me a forced smile. "That sounds nice, but I have a ton of meetings today," she stammered. "Maybe another time." I shrugged, giving her my best innocent look. "Sure thing. Just wanted to see you in action at work, but if you're busy." She gave a quick relieved nod, trying to play it cool. Little did she know, the real surprise was already set. I showed up at the cafe, grabbing a seat where I had a perfect view of her and her friend. They were sitting together, leaning in, laughing like they were the stars of their own private drama. Honestly, It was almost impressive how comfortable she looked. I snapped a couple of pictures, nothing too obvious, just enough to capture the moment. Then I shot her a text. "Hey, just finished my work early. Thought I'd stop by the cafe near your office. Grab you a coffee if you're still around." The moment she saw the message, I swear she froze mid-laugh. Her face went pale as she started frantically looking around. Mike was saying something, but she wasn't listening. Her eyes were darting everywhere. After a few seconds, she mumbled something to him and got up, looking like she'd seen a ghost. I couldn't help but chuckle to myself as I watched her try to act calm while practically running out of the cafe. Meanwhile, Mom was on her daily mission to guide me through this challenging time. She called me that evening with her usual speech about trust and patience. I figured I'd add a little spice, so I said, "You know, Mom, I think Casey and I have been really growing together lately." She seemed relieved, which made it even better. "That's wonderful, Lewis. Growth is a sign of a strong relationship," she chimed in. "Oh, absolutely," I replied, holding back a grin. "We've been connecting in new ways. You might even say we're stronger than ever." If only she knew the real reason behind my stronger relationship. The irony was delicious. Later that night, Casey came home, trying to act like nothing had happened. She sat down next to me, forced a smile, and started talking about her busy day. I couldn't resist. "Hey, you weren't at that cafe near your office today, were you? I thought I saw someone who looked like you," I said casually. She tensed, her eyes widening just for a second before she covered it up with a laugh. "Oh no, definitely not me. Must have been someone else." "Right," I said, "because Brooklyn's full of people who just happen to look exactly like my wife, laughing with a guy named Mike." I gave her a long look, letting her sweat just a little before nodding. "Guess I was wrong. Anyway, glad you had a good day." She was quiet the rest of the night, probably going over every single move she'd made in her head, wondering if she'd slipped up. This was better than any drama series. They thought they had everything under control, but I had every card in my hand, and neither of them had a clue. By now, Casey was on edge. Every time I so much as glanced at her, she'd flinch like I'd caught her in some huge dramatic act, which, well, I had. But she didn't know that. It was getting hard to hold back a smirk every time she gave me that nervous, deer-in-the-headlights look. So I decided to push her a little further. One morning, as she was getting ready to leave, I casually said, "Hey, I was thinking maybe we could do a couple's weekend. Just you, me, and no one else." Her face showed pure panic. She hesitated, clutching her purse like it was some kind of lifeline. Yeah, that sounds nice," she mumbled, but I could see her mind racing. She was probably calculating how to cancel whatever secret plans she had with Mike. Then, just to keep her off balance, I dropped, "You know, it feels like we're closer than ever. I mean, I really feel like I understand you more these days." She blinked at me, clearly not sure if that was a compliment or a warning. "Yeah, me too," she finally stammered, her voice barely a whisper. Later that day, I sent her a text. "Thinking about you. Hope you're having an honest day." The second that message sent, I could almost feel the wave of confusion and fear hit her. She didn't reply right away. When she finally did, it was a simple, "Love you too." Short, safe, and totally out of character. Perfect. Meanwhile, my mom was still convinced I was blissfully unaware. She'd call, giving me her usual speech about letting love breathe and not holding on too tight. So I decided to throw her a curveball. I told her, "Thanks for all the advice, Mom. You've really taught me a lot about trust and knowing when to see through things." Silence. Then a hesitant, "Oh, I'm glad, honey. That's important." She sounded off, like she was wondering if I knew more than I was letting on. And she should be. When Casey got home that night, I greeted her with a big smile. "Hey, I ran into an old friend today. We had an interesting conversation about honesty." Her eyes darted around, and she nervously laughed. "Oh, that's Great. This was too easy. They were both one step away from breaking, and I was going to enjoy every second of it. It was finally time to put all my cards on the table. Casey had been skittish for days, and Mom was practically tiptoeing around every conversation. They thought they'd been so clever, but now it was my turn to show them just how wrong they were. That evening, I told Casey I had a special surprise planned and invited her and Mom over to our house. Just as they both arrived, looking way too nervous for a family gathering, I had everything set up. The pictures I'd taken of Casey and her friend Mike, a few screenshots of her not-so-innocent texts, and even a few of the advice gems from my dear mom. I greeted them both with a wide smile and offered drinks, acting like nothing was out of the ordinary. Mom, trying to keep it together, started with, "So, what's the occasion, honey?" Her voice sounded almost hopeful, like maybe this was going to be a heartfelt family moment. Poor thing. "Oh, just thought it'd be nice to have a little family discussion," I said, my tone as casual as if we were talking about the weather. Casey gave me a strange smile, her eyes darting nervously between me and the stack of papers on the table. She'd noticed. Good. Then I picked up the first photo and held it up with a dramatic sigh. "So, Casey, want to explain this? You and your work friend Mike, looking awfully cozy." Her face drained of color. She opened her mouth, then shut it, her mind clearly racing for an excuse. Louis, I can explain." "Oh, I'm sure you can," I interrupted, smirking. "But hold that thought." I turned to Mom, who was already fidgeting with her purse. "And Mom, thanks for all those pep talks about letting love breathe and freedom and all that really valuable stuff, especially considering you knew everything." Her eyes widened, and she quickly looked down, pretending to check her phone, like that would get her out of this. I laid the rest of the evidence on the table, each item a cherry on top of their shattered perfect plan. Casey was staring at the photos, her hands shaking, while Mom sat there in stunned silence. Honestly, I could have laughed if it weren't so satisfying to just watch them squirm. "So here's the thing," I said, leaning back. "You both thought you could just keep playing this little game like I'd never figure it out. And you know what? I'm almost impressed." Casey and Mom exchanged looks, both desperate for words that weren't coming. "But let's make one thing clear," I continued, my voice low and steady. "I see everything now. Every lie, every excuse, every look you gave each other behind my back. So go ahead, tell me why you did it." Neither of them spoke. Casey looked down, and Mom couldn't meet my eyes. They'd lost, and they knew it. And me? I walked out, leaving them to pick up the pieces of their master plan, finally knowing the truth.